Welcome to the Men's Weekly Podcast, where we explore faith, brotherhood, and godly leadership. Join us as we dive into Scripture, tackle real-life challenges, and uncover what it means to become the example in every aspect of life. Whether you're a husband, father, or leader, this is your place for encouragement and growth. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to the podcast here. I'm Joshua, your host, and I'm going to be walking you through a really exciting episode today. However, before we get started, let's talk about what happened last week when we explored the role of a godly husband. This concept of leaving a legacy, this is why we are here, my brothers. We are here to set the example and lead our families in the way that they should go. But guess what? There's another layer to it, isn't it? Just like with everything that we explore inside of Men's Weekly, we go from one glory to the next, deeper and deeper into the recesses of the darkness within our souls so that we can expose it by shining the light. One of those areas is inside of our role as a leader. And today in episode 4 here, we're going to unpack the idea of servant leadership. We're going to talk about the question here. What's it look like to lead with humility in a world that is so overvaluing power and riches and honor and glory over service? And we're going to take a look at how it is that we can lead like Christ in our workplaces, in our communities. And of course, this reflects in our home, doesn't it? There's going to be a lot of fun things we'll dig into here today, and some of them not so fun. Because guess what? As we go deep, dark into the recesses, as I said before, this is going to be a bumpy journey. Some of these things are going to sting. But here's the beauty is once we have exposed the darkness inside of us, it becomes very empowering and freeing as we move forward acknowledging that truth. So let's begin here in episode 4 with the heart of a servant leader. As always, I'm going to jump into some scriptures. Now, whether you like them or not is completely irrelevant to me. The fact is they were keys inside of my journey, and I am certain at a 100% rate of certainty that they can become the keys to unlock your journey into your next glory as well, my brother. So let's take a look at Matthew 23:11. It says here, the greatest among you will be your servant. Sounds so simple, doesn't it? Absolutely, it does. But just like with every other scripture we've ever covered in all of the Bible, it's much easier to read it and say it aloud than it is to actually do it. I don't know about you, but I don't see a lot of examples where the greatest among are actually the servant thereof. This is one of the things that we discussed as we moved from episode 1 through episode 3 in the representation of a man before God. You see, there's a depth. Even God himself reached his own right hand down to us. So there's something pretty powerful in the fact that he desires us to become servants. Philippians 2, verses 3 and 4 says it like this. Don't do anything out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility, value others above yourself. And don't look only to your own interests, but each one of you look to the interests of the others. As is one of the beautiful things that we do inside of fellowship is we're able to share what's going on inside of our lives and then be able to give heed or give love or give service to the others, be able to pray for one another, be able to encourage one another, to even connect inside of our community. Think about it. The servant leadership actually starts with humility. Have you ever been humbled before, brother? Have you ever come to that place in your journey and you're like, wow, I am on my knees. This is the thing right now, only thing that I can do is get on my knees with humility and beg forgiveness and beg for mercy and beg for help. See, most of us, we only know humility by actually hitting a wall, slamming rock bottom and getting down on our knees and our face because we can no longer think on how to move forward in the situation we're in. Well, same with leadership, only quite the inverse. It has to begin with the humility. So all that humility you've experienced, brother, consider it an operational process that's going to bring you to a place where as you enter into leadership, you can start it out humbly. And then you'll have to guard that, won't you? I know I have had to on my journey. It's absolutely insane the amount of temptation that comes up, because guess what? Not everything is roses and rainbows, is it? Not at all. The reality of this world is extremely dark. The reality of our souls is extremely dark. But understand and recognize that leadership itself is all about serving others, not elevating ourselves. That's one of the realizations I had to come to within my family. In fact, just this evening, as the recording of this podcast here on February the 4th, 2025, I had a nice collision with my queen. And I've had this process where I go about literally leading the family every night in some Bible time and some prayer time. And the children were just too tired today. And I had that opportunity right there. Did I want to step in and come and dominate that and say, no, this is about my instructions, do it? No, we talked about it last week, didn't we? Now, old me would have done that, 100%. Would have absolutely done that. But I had to recognize it was about serving others. It had nothing to do at all with me. Of course, Christ gave us that ultimate example, didn't he, of a servant leader? He's over there in John 13, 14, and 15, washing the disciples' feet. He's literally about to go put himself up on this cross to do the will of his Father, to save all mankind for all intents and purposes. And he gets down, puts a towel around him, grabs the basin, and begins to wash the feet of his disciples. You see, this is deep. There's something about it. You know, we all pick up dirt on this journey. And as we begin to walk into our workplaces or we begin to walk into our communities, guess what? We're going to find people that's got a lot of dirt on their feet too. As we are entering into our communities of fellowship and things, and guess what? The brothers are going to have dirt on their feet. Sisters too, of course, but think about it. Brothers, we walk in a dirty world. You are going to pick up some muck on your feet and you're going to need it washed. And then you're going to need to be able to turn around and wash the other's feet as you begin to step into servant leadership. Now, what happens? It's a ripple effect, right? Like you drop the stone in the water and boom, 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 it goes all the way across the lake. It ripples out. It expands past the home, past the neighborhood, into the community, into the workplace, into the fellowships, into the stores, and into everything we do. Every place we go is an opportunity for the effect of a servant leader to manifest. So think about it. How can you reflect Christ's example of humility in the way that you're leading today? Examine yourself. Just like everything on this journey, brothers, this isn't about me pointing a finger at you. I'm just bringing what the Father puts in my heart. We're having a conversation right now. This is the question I've had to ask myself year after year after year after running this race now for 25 years as a man of Christ. How can I improve this? How can I reflect this more accurately? And you know what it required? Having to learn even more. And guess what that requires? My brother, humility. You betcha. How do we become a true servant leader? The heart is going to have to begin with humility. So reflect on that. Answer the question yourself. Maybe have a conversation with your spouse once you think you've got the answer. If you're not ready for that, head over to Men's Weekly and join us for fellowship and your brothers, and we'll get it conversated for sure. You come and join us. I think you'll love the experience. All right, let's talk about this second point here. It's the challenging point. Yeah, challenges that come up when we lead with humility. And this is just really deep because if you can grab a hold of it, this manifests everywhere. So we're going to try and keep it a little bit general. I'll give you some specifics in my own journey, but you're going to have to take this and examine for yourself. That's the beauty of all this. So some things that came up for me in particular, or let's speak more generally at first here, the idea of balancing, right? Balancing the authority with humility when we're in leadership roles. Once we get into a role of a leader, there is an authority that comes with that, particularly in a workplace, whatever it is that you're doing. If you have a business that you're running, we even see this in the churches. There's an authority that comes up. But then how do we balance that with humility? Now, I know one of the things that I had experienced going through this, and this was a very specific struggle that I had, but in running my business, oftentimes I would go back for a job just to be able to support growth, to make a pivot, whatever it was. Pretty high earner. It's just a typical, hey, I'm going to go get some extra consistent income and keep plowing away in the back end. And I've done that numbers of times through the years. This last experience of that did not go quite as planned. I walked into it with that full humility, with that I'm going to get the balance right inside of this space. And this really ties in with my next struggle, but I was tempted, frankly, to call out the nonsense that I was seeing going on, and not only in the organization, but particularly in my department from leadership. And it was very difficult to just sit there on it. And I'm sitting in my prayer time going, how do I balance this, Father? How do I get it going properly? How can I manifest and again mirror this reflection of Christ? And it came to the place where I ultimately ran my mouth. See, this temptation to seek some kind of recognition or some kind of power, or to get others to buy in. I think that's what that really came down to for me in that particular struggle, was I needed to be able to say the things that were on my mind no matter what. And guess what? I wasn't working on all the areas when that happened. Yeah. So I absolutely blew things up, burned it to the ground. How about staying patient? That's another one. We got to the end. This is the catalyst for this whole thing, in my experience, at least. Being able to stay patient no matter what kind of situations come up, whatever kind of trial comes along with it. And again, easier to say than do, isn't it? Absolutely. But I sat there and I was patient for a while, but because we had finished our portion of the work and there was kind of really nothing to do at that point, and we had others that we were relying on to continue the projects forward that we were no longer responsible for. And I had no idea what to do. Because in that, I'm finding I don't know what to tell my team because I have no clear vision on where I'm going to lead them to. And so I began to, instead of staying patient, I began to sit there and get frustrated and go through the struggle of, do I communicate this to my team? What do I tell my team? How do I respond when they bring things to me? And so being able to stay patient and kind in those things was very, very difficult. The situation themselves are difficult enough. But when you start compounding the effects of leadership and leading a team, you understand everybody's got troubles. And if you're worth your salt, they'll come bring their troubles to you because they know that you'll solve the problem. And unfortunately, in this last experience of mine, I did not only not solve the problem, but it looks like I dropped a grenade in the entire situation. Now, this is hard to admit. I'm sitting over here trying not to shake my head as I'm having this communication right now with you. But the fact is, these things are difficult. It is really hard to balance, and it takes a lot of practice. Balancing the authority with humility, resisting all that temptation to seek out the recognition, seek out the power, seek out the buy-in from the people, and of course, staying patient and kind. A lot of times, and I've used rough words my whole life. So when you hear this podcast, you may think you completely get where I'm coming from, but no, 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 no. This has been chiseled away after decade, after decade, after decade. And even just a few years ago, I was pretty vile in my speech. They say cuss like a sailor, cuss like a truck driver. And I could still, don't get me wrong, I could still unload if need be. But the fact of the matter is, all of these lessons and circumstances and table settings, as I call them, that the Father had prepared for me, were all about helping me to learn the lesson with the challenge. Because some of the things that I employed that were working were like the concept of listening, for example. And this started in my home. This was where I got the clarity of it all, and then I began to implement it. Little too late, I would say, in my last experience. But that's the beauty. In the next experience, I'm able to do this even better. And so will you on your journey, brother. Everything's been designed to make you better. It doesn't matter how far you've fallen short. Welcome to the club. We've all fallen short of the glory. But the fact is, when you fall down, do you get back up? That's the fact I'm after. That's the question. Are you so beat down that you won't get back up? Because if you get to that place, brother, hey, I've been there. It took a long time for me to wake up from my last stint. It took about a 30-day fast and about to lose my marriage over the whole ordeal. Because there are lessons that we've got to learn inside of leadership in order to move forward to our full calling, to our full potential. So the first strategy that worked like amazingly was listening. And not just listening, but like active listening. Like I'm understanding. I want to know, what is it that's going on with you? What's the actual need? Okay, you're complaining about this, that, and the other thing, but what's the underlying trigger? And those are the things, because I had just been learning about triggers, that came up for me a lot. Just listening. Of course, sharing credit, celebrating other people's contributions, celebrating other people's wins, because we were doing daily stand-ups and weekly meetings and talent development and all of that. That was our opportunity. And those things worked great. We were able to literally lift everybody up in the morning. And then every week we would come together and strategize. We'd be able to celebrate. We'd retrospect. We'd strategize. We'd do all these things together. And so as a team, we would begin to develop. And I started to see that as amazing growth, of course, until the day came that it was discovered what I was saying about others. You see, I tell you what, my brother, your sin will find you out, but we have a merciful Father. And so as we go running back to him and humbly repenting and beginning to change the way we think, again, awakening, repenting, returning to him, he's excited and he is looking forward to having us home. So whatever it is you've messed up in, again, don't worry about it. Move forward, repent, get back up, and go examine, what was the lesson? What was the lesson I got out of that? And then begin to take action. Begin to take action. And this brings me to my final strategy, was when I finally began to set the example. Now, of course, I was doing this in the beginning quite well when we had active work going on. I was putting the other's needs before my own. Even in the small ways, like, hey, man, how can I come and help you? Oh, you're blocked on something. Great. Can we get one-on-one in a Zoom real quick? Hey, brother, I see you're having troubles. You look like you're struggling. And I'm talking about socially. I got brothers that I network with, brothers that I fellowship with. And you could tell when people are going through some things, right? And I reach out to them. Hey, what's going on? How can I help you? You need to talk. It doesn't matter what way it is. It's just the fact of doing it. Setting an example by broadcasting. Hey, your needs are important too. I'll be in that gap for you right now. I'm here for you. How can I help you? How can I serve you? And I've seen brothers come from the brink of sitting on a motel bedroom with the gun in their hand, just thinking about swallowing it. Thinking about running themselves off the road and work. Yeah, I'm telling you, brothers, we all go through some real dark recesses here, some experiences, some pits, as we call them, or valleys, even valleys of the shadow of death. But if we can set the example by putting the other's needs first, it helps a lot. So what happened is, at the end of my experience, ultimately, I lost sight of this and I just began to field everybody's negative assessment of the situation. And because I was unclear about where I was going, and because I was having trouble with that concept of being patient and kind no matter what, I couldn't help them. I didn't even know what to say. Have you been there? This is not something that's super simple you're going to walk into, brother. You got to understand that. There are many, many times this has come up for me in my journey. And in leading in business, I haven't even built the team yet because I believe the Father is like, you're not ready to do this, son. You were just not ready. And it proved it in my last experience. But I got the critical lessons and I just shared them all with you. Listening, sharing credit, not having to take credit for everything, honoring others, putting them up and even their needs before my own. And these were all things that prepared me for the next leg of this journey here with Men's Weekly. Well, let's talk about what we can take away from this, my brother. This episode's going a little long. I'm having a lot of fun here today with it, and I hope you're enjoying this episode. Practically speaking, what can we talk about? Well, the thing that worked for me and one of the catalysts that brought me to a horrible place with my last experience was daily prayer. Now, if you want to go specific, you can go daily prayer for humility, right? Just simply asking God to help you lead with grace and servanthood, with humility. Now, my SPF, if you will, study, pray, and fasting, is the disciplines that we've developed here that we share inside of our fellowships to help each man move forward in their journey. And I would encourage you to go take a look at that as well. Study, pray, fast, SPF framework. And now this thing is, it's deep because during the time that I had my greatest struggle, my prayer discipline was at its weakest, had been for at least a year. And so I noticed that I had a chink in the armor in hindsight, and I didn't see it at the time, but I want to tell you, you want to take away a power nugget out of this is simply develop the habit of daily prayer for whatever it is you are striving for. And of course, inside of this topic, we're talking about leading with humility. The second one was identifying one way to serve, because the opportunities are endless, brother. You go out there are opportunities to serve everywhere. And once you leave your house, there are many, many people in the community that are at need or in need, or even at work. You'll find lots of people. So what could you do? Well, for me, I found this in my home. It was a key takeaway that I'm looking forward to employing here inside of the business, is identifying just the one way to serve, not focusing on the multitude, just one. Keep it simple. So you can take a moment inside of this week and just find one specific way that you could serve someone. Maybe it's at work, maybe it's somewhere in your community, maybe it's at your church, maybe wherever it is. But you can pick one. And now we can get to action. The third one is examining your heart. And this has been my expression of love for the brotherhood, for the fellowship for the past 2 years. As the Father began to show me the dark recesses of my heart and where I still had not gotten rid of the beam in my own eye, I began to reflect on what were my motives. Was I serving myself in these things? Was I serving God? Was I actually trying to help them by saying those things that I said? Or was I just trying to throw someone under the bus? You see this again. I struggled with it because in the moment I couldn't see it. And I'm sure it's the same for you in your journey. You may not see the dark pit that you're sitting in right now fully, brother. But as you begin to ascend out of that pit into the peak, whatever's ahead of you, you're going to look back. You're going to see this from a whole different perspective. Now, if you'll examine your heart in this moment, as I did the moment that took place in my last example, you're going to find some lessons there. You're going to find some action, some pivots that the Father desires you to take to step into your God-given role as a servant leader. So think about it like this. Servant leaders and servant leadership really doesn't mean leading with pride. It doesn't really mean leading at the forefront of everything. It means leading with humility, putting others above ourselves, and reflecting Christ's example in every area of our lives. And this is why the organization has pivoted to become the example. This is why we've launched Men's Weekly. You see, it's hard to examine these things when you get real about the facts in your life, when you get raw about the feelings and emotions you experience, and you begin to expose the stories you're telling yourself that are causing that fruit to be produced in your life. You can change it. You can change it. So this week, make a commitment. Brother, can you make a commitment to lead in humility? Serve someone in your workplace, your community, and join us next week, because we're going to talk about the depth of temptation and how to overcome it as men of God. Now, as we go through this, everything is tied to trials and temptations. So hang on to it. You don't want to miss episode 5 here. All these strategies that the Father's been revealing to me inside of my journey and collectively with the other brothers inside of Men's Weekly, I just look forward to having you for fellowship so you can experience the power that we experience week in and week out here. So we'll see you next time. Don't miss it. For now, your brother Joshua saying shalom. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening to the Men's Weekly podcast. If this episode inspired you, share it with a brother and take the next step in your journey by joining our 52-week study. Visit mensweekly.us to connect with the brotherhood and start becoming the man God has called you to be. Remember, transformation happens one step at a time. So stay faithful, stay humble, and keep moving forward. See you next week.